Who's our first caller?
The first caller that we're going to take is Jenna in
right.
South California. So Jenna has a boyfriend who's freaked out by COVID and wants to go back to being a JW and would like to have a chat with us about it. Jenna, you're on the line. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. How are you guys?
I'm good, Jenna. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for taking my call. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for calling.
Thank you. Thank you.
What would you like to chat about today?
Well, I am an atheist, and I've been in a relationship with my boyfriend for about 4 years. He grew up born in Jehovah's Witness, and ever since I've known him, he's told me that he would never go back. And, you know, has told me a lot of horrible things about the organization. Well, come to now, he wants to go back to being a Jehovah's Witness, and I'm losing my damn mind.
What's his primary reason?
How to deal with this.
Has he given like a primary reason?
He thinks the world is going to end. No joke. He thinks the world is ending right now. He thinks the pandemic is, I don't know, part of the Great Tribulation or whatever they think.
Right.
And he's freaking out.
So the reason he wants to go back to being a JW isn't because he actually has a belief in the deity. It's because there's circumstances that are surrounding him that are reinforcing his previous perceptions from being a JW, that the apocalypse is a probability. And so this is a form of confirmation bias that he's having. Have you had discussions with him regarding the differentiations between what's currently going on and what the book actually says will happen, so that maybe if you can point out those differentiations, you can start to reason him out of this perception that he has?
Yeah, I've definitely tried. However, I don't know what happened, but that brainwashing switch just went on in his head. And,
right.
You know, this is the truth, and, you know, I'm going to die and all this stuff. So, you know, I want to help him because I love him. I don't want him to go back, you know, but
yeah,
I'm just like, I'm lost here, and I don't really care about the Bible. So, you know, I'm not interested in debating scriptures with him because the Bible means nothing to me.
Right.
So I don't care, you know,
So what about all the times where somebody, what about all the times where somebody said that the end is here and they were wrong, which has been every single time throughout history that somebody has predicted the end, which Jehovah's Witnesses have done many times. Everybody who's ever predicted it has been wrong. Why does he think he's more likely to be right?
I guess because there was his family right now is doing the whole love bombing tactic on him, and they're constantly sending him bull crap and scriptures and articles. I guess there was one of the Watchtower publications from 2015 that supposedly predicted the coronavirus.
Oh, I very much doubt it.
That.
So they're.
Yeah, I know. Please laugh.
So it's retcon essentially. So they're taking previous documentation that's been put out as propaganda by an organization and then utilizing it to fit into the current climate to suggest that, or infer that it's what's happening now. So. Have you talked to him about, like Matt said, about the previous failed prophecies? Like the Jehovah's Witnesses have had to redo their organizational structure. I believe it's something like 4 or 5 times because they had very specific dates for the end times. There's clearly a reason that he came out of it initially. So this is a fear response. Like if he would have had that fear at the same time, it just didn't have this sort of external confirmation bias reinforcement that people are utilizing to manipulate him now, by the sounds of it. Is there any way that you can ask him questions about why he previously left and what caused him to come to the realizations that these end time prophecies previously weren't accurate, so that he can have some sort of internal cognitive map of, you know, why he left initially and why it was reasonable to do so, that he can refer back to.
Other things.
Yeah.
There's a couple other things to address as well, which not just the fact that people have gotten it wrong, because maybe this time he's got it right or somebody else has got it right, but it's worth kind of pointing that out. for me, he stopped believing, and he seems to be like being fear pressured into this, not evidence pressured into this. And so if he cares about what's actually true, then not only should he be able to recognize that JWs and others have gotten it wrong repeatedly about the end times, but what kind of God does he believe in that would use a fear tactic to get him to come back to the fold as opposed to presenting actual evidence? If they think the fear tactic and the end times is so obvious evidence for Jehovah, then why doesn't Jehovah just show up and talk to us all? I mean, if they, it's kind of like, it's so obvious, it must be true, and yet we don't see that.
Oh, trust me, definitely. I've said some pretty mean things about Jehovah in front of him, and it's like I don't even know who this person is. As far as like the failed prophecies, of course, I've brought them up to him, and he's like, oh, well, the brothers, they were just looking into it. They weren't true Jehovah's Witnesses. They were just looking too much into it. It's like they have an excuse for everything that they got wrong.
Well, that's the thing about when you're lying and manipulating. It's easy to just make up reasons why you got things wrong, which is what these groups of people are doing. If he got out once, there must be, like, from a psychological perspective, there's a reason that he came out. It sounds to me like this is a fear response, that he's looking for reinforcement because he wants some sort of safety. He wants to alleviate this anxiolytic response. So he's got anxiety and he's got fear. And as a result of the anxiety and fear, he's looking for something that's relief. And he sees this as potential relief because he has sort of existential fear that is coupled with it, because now he's maybe facing death in a way that he hasn't previously. So if you can figure out ways for him to grapple with and find coping mechanisms that are better avenues for quelling that fear and dealing with that fear, that might be a good way to go about it as well. Because clearly, from a psychological perspective, this is something that he's doing as a fear response, I would say. And it sounds like, based on what you're telling me. So perhaps addressing that might be a good way to start to help him come out too. Figure out why he previously got out. There's obviously a way that he was able to rationalize his way out of it. And at the same time, address this new component, which is the fear response.
And I would also encourage you, you've talked about Jehovah. That piece of halibut was good enough for Jehovah. How can I make it worse? Jehovah. You can do that stuff. But we got an email this week from someone basically pointing out that they're going stir crazy because of being on lockdown from COVID. And they were mentioning that it's not surprising to them that the suicide rate may have gone up, and that they are worried that there's going to be nothing to live for, that they're never going to be able to hang out with people or go to concerts, or that nothing will return to normal. This pandemic has brought out the worst in some people, the best in some people, the fears of some people, and probably, you can talk to him all you want. Probably the best course of action is to try to be both compassionate and reasonable, and realize that he's dealing with something that is clearly traumatic to the point where you don't even recognize him or his actions anymore, and that this is happening to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And people are utilizing that vulnerability to brainwash him. So what he needs is a tether to reality, if you can be that for him.
Yeah, I'm doing my best, but it gets overwhelming because I don't want to hear it. I don't I don't want to hear it. I'm not trying to. I will never, ever, ever in my life become a Jehovah's Witness. And, he's already like trying to pressure me and be like, we need to get married and do this right. And I'm like, I would never marry a Jehovah's Witness. Come on now. It's just wild to me. It's so wild.
When I'm recommending the high road, trust me, if you lose your shit and throw a fit and start yelling, you're probably justified just as much as he's justified in panicking, or even more so than he's justified in panicking about end time stuff. Just remember, I mean, it's a rough time out there for everybody, and I for one would like us all to strive to be better, but that doesn't mean that you let somebody push you around.
For sure.
Right.
Absolutely. You know, take care of yourself as well. If you get to a breaking point,
Yeah.
unfortunately, it is what it is. But
Yeah.
hopefully we gave you a little bit of insight on things that we ourselves may try, or a different perspective, because you're in the eye of the
You gave me a
storm.
lot of it.
Oh, good. Well, I'm
I
glad.
really appreciate it, you guys.
I'm glad, Jenna. We are
Thank you,
going to let
Jenna.
you
Thank you so
go.
much.
Thank you so much for calling. Have a good rest of your
Okay.
day. Stay safe.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
No problem. She seems so sweet. That's so hard to deal with.
Yeah.
It breaks my heart.
We get a lot of email from people who are in relationships or dealing with relationships where they don't necessarily agree on religion. But at a time like this, where you and your partner think you agree, and then the world starts falling apart, and one of you goes a different direction for comfort than the other, that can be like, I have difficulty imagining that. I have friends who date and have married theists, and it works out. And people for years ask me, Matt, would you consider dating a theist? And generally my answer is no. Not that it's necessarily an immediate deal breaker.
Yeah.
But because for me, relationships are so much about respect and trust that I don't think I could be in a relationship with somebody who seriously believed things that I could not respect.
Yeah.
And if they did, and they had good arguments, then I'd probably stop being an atheist.
Yeah. And at this point in time, too, people are dealing with an unprecedented situation. So they're going to be spending more time with people that they're in relationships with than they ever would have, especially if they share a domicile, and not have as much external one-on-one time with other people. Like there's an inordinate amount of stress. There's so many variables to consider. So hopefully that helps some other people too.